The rain didn't just fall. It clawed at the cabin's walls, each drop a scream in the night, as if the storm knew I wasn't supposed to be here. I arrived at the cabin as the sun bled into the horizon, its weak light swallowed by a sky bruised with dark clouds. The forest around me was a sprawling, silent beast, its trees looming like sentinels, guarding secrets I wasn't meant to uncover. My mother's death had carved a hollow in my chest, a wound so raw I could still hear her voice in the quiet moments, soft, steady, urging me to keep going. I needed this isolation, this cabin buried deep in the wilderness, to stitch myself back together. The world felt too heavy, too loud, and this place promised silence. But silence, I would learn, can be a predator's disguise. The cabin was small, its wooden walls weathered by years of neglect. The air inside smelled of damp pine and something faintly sour, like forgotten grief. I dropped my bag by the door, the thud echoing in the empty space. Outside, the wind began to howl a low, mournful sound that seemed to rise from the earth itself. The windows rattled in their frames, and I felt a prickle of unease, as if the forest was watching me waiting. I pushed the thought away, blaming it on exhaustion. I'd driven for hours, the road twisting through endless trees, each mile pulling me further from the life I'd left behind. My mother's face flashed in my mind, her smile, her hands, the way she'd hum softly while cooking. The memory was a knife sharp and unrelenting. I lit a fire in the small hearth, the flames casting flickering shadows across the room. The warmth did little to ease the chill in my bones. The storm was coming. I could feel it in the air, thick and electric. The sky rumbled a deep, guttural sound that vibrated through the floorboards. I sank into the couch, pulling a blanket over my shoulders, trying to anchor myself against the growing unease. The isolation I'd craved now felt like a weight pressing against my chest. Every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind seemed to whisper that I wasn't as alone as I thought. The storm hit just after nightfall. The wind became a living thing, tearing at the trees, slamming against the cabin like a fist. The windows shook violently, and the thunder roared so loud it felt like the sky was splitting open. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mother's voice looping in my mind. You're stronger than you know. But I didn't feel strong. I felt small, fragile, like the cabin itself, trembling under the storm's assault. The darkness pressed in thick and suffocating, and I closed my eyes, willing sleep to come. That's when I heard it. A knock. Sharp, deliberate, cutting through the storm's chaos. At first, I thought it was a branch tossed by the wind, but the sound came again, 3 hard raps, insistent human. My heart stuttered. I sat up the blanket, falling to the floor, my breath catching in my throat. Who could be out here in the middle of nowhere in a storm like this? I waited, frozen, hoping it was a mistake. But the knocking grew louder, more desperate, morphing into a frantic pounding. Someone was out there, and they weren't leaving. I swung my legs off the bed, my bare feet cold against the wooden floor. The cabin felt smaller now, the walls closing in. My mind raced, conjuring images of lost hikers, stranded travelers, or worse, something not quite human. I grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand, its beam weak and trembling in my shaking hand. The pounding continued, relentless, each blow a hammer against my nerves. I moved toward the door, my pulse thundering in my ears, every step heavy with dread. I didn't want to open it. Every instinct screamed to stay still, to hide, but the sound was so desperate, so raw, it pulled at something deep inside me, something human. I reached the door, my hand hovering over the knob. The wind howled outside, and the thunder cracked again, shaking the cabin. The knocking stopped for a moment, and in the silence, I heard my own ragged breathing. Then it came again, softer now, almost pleading. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and turned the knob. The door creaked open, and the storm rushed in cold and wet, carrying with it the figure of a man. His eyes were wild, not with fear, but with something darker, something that made the air feel wrong. The man stood in the doorway, soaked to the bone, his clothes clinging to his frame like a second skin. Rain streamed down his face, mixing with something darker blood, I realized, staining his shirt in ugly splotches. His hair was plastered to his forehead, and his breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. He looked like he'd crawled out of a nightmare, and yet his voice, when he spoke, was steady, almost too calm. "My wife?" He said, his words cutting through the storm's roar. "We crashed near the creek. She's hurt unconscious. This was the only house with lights on." His eyes locked onto mine, unblinking, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. There was something off about him, something I couldn't name, but the urgency in his voice pulled me forward. I didn't think. I didn't question. I grabbed my raincoat, the fabric heavy and cold, and my flashlight, its beam barely piercing the darkness outside. I followed him into the night, the storm swallowing us whole. The forest was a living thing, its branches clawing at my face, the rain stinging my skin. The man moved quickly, his steps sure despite the mud and the dark. I struggled to keep up my boots, slipping on the wet ground, my heart pounding in my chest. The creek wasn't far, but it felt like an eternity, each step pulling me deeper into a world I didn't understand. The storm raged around us. The thunder, a constant drumbeat, the lightning flashing just long enough to reveal the man's silhouette ahead of me. He didn't look back, didn't speak. And that silence gnawed at me, a quiet too heavy for the chaos of the night. We reached the wreckage, a mangled car, half buried in a shallow ditch by the creek. The headlights were dead. The windshield, shattered rain pooling in the jagged cracks. Inside, a woman lay slumped against the passenger seat, her head lolling to one side. Blood oozed from a gash on her forehead, dark and viscous, mixing with the rain that dripped through the broken roof. She wasn't moving. My chest tightened, a wave of nausea rising in my throat. I didn't know her, but the sight of her pale, broken, so utterly still, felt like a violation of something sacred. The man was already at the car, yanking the door open with a force that made the metal groan. "Help me," he said, his voice sharp now, almost commanding. I moved without thinking, my hands shaking as I helped him pull her from the wreckage. Her body was limp, heavy, her skin cold against my fingers. We carried her through the storm back to the cabin, her weight a burden that pressed against my soul. The rain was relentless, soaking through my coat, my clothes, my skin, until I felt like I was drowning in it. Back at the cabin, I laid her on my bed, the sheets soaking up the blood and water. I grabbed the first aid kit from my bag, my hands trembling as I disinfected the wound, the sharp smell of alcohol cutting through the damp air. I bandaged her as best I could, my fingers clumsy, my mind racing. She still didn't move, but her chest rose and fell shallow and uneven. She was alive, barely. The man stood by the door, watching his eyes, never leaving her. I offered him dry clothes, my clothes too big for his lean frame, and he changed in silence, his movements mechanical, almost detached. I poured us both a glass of wine, the red liquid catching the firelight like blood. The cabin felt smaller now, the walls pressing in the storm outside, a constant reminder of our isolation. I sat across from him, the glass cold in my hand, and tried to break the silence. "How did the accident happen?" I asked, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet room. He took a sip, his eyes flickering to the fire, and began to speak. "They were visiting her parents," he said, driving through the storm when the car skidded off the road. But as he spoke, his story unraveled. Details shifted. Timelines blurred his words, slipping like water through my fingers. He said they'd been married for years, but then mentioned meeting her recently. He described the crash in vivid detail, then contradicted himself in the next breath. His eyes darted around the room, never meeting mine for long, and I felt a growing unease, a certainty that something was wrong. He's traumatized, I told myself, trying to quiet the fear clawing at my gut. He's just in shock. I need rest, he said, suddenly, standing his chair scraping against the floor. He walked to the bedroom, where the woman lay closing the door behind him. I was alone in the living room, the fire dying, the storm raging outside. The wine tasted bitter, now the glass heavy in my hand. I locked the front door, the bolt sliding into place with a finality that made my stomach lurch. I settled on the couch, pulling the blanket over me, but sleep wouldn't come. The cabin was too quiet now, the storm's roar muffled by the walls, and in that silence, I felt it, a presence, watching, waiting. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, and in them, I saw my own fear reflected back, a fear that knew no name. I don't know what woke me, but my eyes snapped open, my heart racing, before my mind could catch up. The living room was dark, the fire reduced to glowing embers, the storm a distant rumble, but something was wrong. The air felt thick, heavy, with a presence I couldn't explain. Then I felt it hot breath against my face, close, too close. I froze, my body rigid, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. She was there, the woman from the car standing over me, her hair still damp, clinging to her pale face like seaweed. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, and they held me captive, pinning me to the couch. I opened my mouth to scream, but her hand shot out, pressing against my lips, silencing me. "Please don't scream," she whispered, her voice trembling, her breath hot against my ear. Her fingers were cold, her grip firm, and I nodded, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure she could hear it. She leaned closer, her eyes darting to the bedroom door, her voice barely audible. "He's not my husband." The words hit me like a blow, stealing my breath. I stared at her, my mind scrambling to make sense of it. "What?" I whispered, my voice shaking. She glanced at the door again, her body tense, her fingers digging into my arm. "Call the cops," she said, her voice breaking. "He's dangerous." I reached for my phone, my hands trembling, but the screen showed no signal. The storm had knocked out the tower, leaving us cut off, trapped. Panic surged through me, a wave of nausea that threatened to pull me under. "We need to get to the police station," I whispered, my voice barely steady. She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. But then she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a murmur. "He has a knife." The words were a blade cutting through the last of my composure. I glanced at the bedroom door, my pulse hammering in my ears. My car keys were in there on the nightstand next to the man who wasn't her husband. The man who had lied, who had brought her here, who was something far worse than a stranded traveler. I stood my legs unsteady and moved toward the bedroom door. Every step felt like a betrayal of my instincts, which screamed at me to run, to hide, to do anything but open that door. But we needed the keys. We needed to escape. I cracked the door open, the hinges silent, and peered inside. The man was asleep, his breathing slow and steady. His body sprawled across the bed. His damp clothes were scattered on the floor, and there on the nightstand, the keys gleamed faintly in the dim light. I took a deep breath, my heart in my throat, and stepped inside. The floor creaked under my weight, and I froze, my breath catching. The man shifted, groaning softly, and I felt my blood turn to ice. I waited, every muscle tense, my eyes locked on his form. He didn't wake. I moved again, slower this time, each step a prayer, each breath a gamble. The keys were so close, their metal surface catching the faint light from the window. I reached out my hand, trembling, and closed my fingers around them. The cold metal burned against my skin, and I held my breath, waiting for the world to shatter. He rolled over his arm, flopping across the bed, and I ducked my body, pressed against the wall, my heart nearly stopping. He exhaled sharply, a sound that felt like a warning, but his eyes remained closed. I crept backward, the keys clutched tightly in my hand, and shut the door behind me with a soft click. The woman was waiting in the living room, her eyes wide, her body trembling. I grabbed her hand, her skin cold and clammy, and we moved to the front door. I unlocked it, the bolt sliding free with a sound that felt too loud, too final. We ran into the storm, the rain lashing at our faces, the wind tearing at our clothes. The forest was a blur of shadows and movement, the trees looming like giants in the dark. We reached the car, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys, the rain making them slick. I unlocked the door, and we fell inside, the woman, sobbing quietly beside me. I turned the key in the ignition, the engine roaring to life, and peeled out onto the dirt road, the tires slipping in the mud. The road stretched before us, a black ribbon in the storm, but behind us, the darkness felt alive, watching, waiting. The drive was a nightmare, the rain hammering the windshield, the wipers struggling to keep up. The woman sat beside me, her breath hitching, her hands clenched into fists. The forest closed in around us, its trees clawing at the sky, their branches scraping the car as we sped through the night. I didn't know where we were going, only that we had to get away, had to reach the police station, had to find safety in a world that felt like it was unraveling. The lights of the county police station appeared like a beacon flickering through the rain. I pulled into the lot, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel. We stumbled inside the woman, clinging to my arm, her face pale and streaked with tears. The officers took her statement, their faces grim, their questions sharp. One of them made a call for backup, and they raced to the cabin, leaving us in the sterile light of the station. I sat there, my clothes soaked my body, trembling, waiting for answers that didn't come. They found nothing. No man, no struggle. Just the woman's blood dried on my bed sheets and a broken wine glass on the floor. The officer sat me down, his face unreadable. "He's a known stalker," he said. "Robert Walsh. Escaped custody 2 weeks ago. You're lucky to be alive." The words were a punch to the gut, confirming what I'd feared, but couldn't fully grasp. The woman's family thanked me, called me a hero, but I didn't feel heroic. I felt hollow, like the cabin itself, a shell left behind by something dark and unknowable. I pray every day that they catch him, that Robert Walsh is found before he finds someone else. But deep down, I know the truth. The forest doesn't give up its secrets. The storm doesn't forget. And somewhere out there in the dark, he's still watching. The wind howled through the pines, a low moan that seemed to whisper my name. I stood alone on the cliff's edge, my boots sinking into the damp earth. The valley below, shrouded in a sea of twisted branches. My heart raced, not from the climb, but from a feeling I couldn't shake, like the forest was alive, watching me with eyes I couldn't see. I'd come here for solitude, to escape the noise of life, but the silence was heavier than I'd expected, pressing against my chest like a warning. Why did it feel like the trees were holding their breath, waiting for me to make a mistake? I'd chosen this ridge for its desolation, a place where the world couldn't follow. The trail was grueling, 7 miles of steep switchbacks, roots snaking across the path like traps. My pack dug into my shoulders, heavy with gear, a new green tent, a sleeping bag, a knife my dad gave me before he passed. The blade was my anchor, its weight steady in my hand, a reminder of his lessons about the woods. Trust the silence, he'd said, but never trust it completely. I'd laughed then, but now As the sun bled crimson into the horizon, his words felt like a prophecy. The cliff overlooked a river, its waters glinting like a silver scar in the fading light. I set up camp behind a gnarled oak, its branches clawing at the sky like they were trying to escape. The fire came to life with a crackle, the scent of burning pine mingling with the earth's damp musk. I sharpened a twig with my knife, the blade catching the firelight, and speared a piece of steak. The sizzle filled the air, grounding me, but the forest stayed quiet, too quiet. No birds, no rustling leaves, just a void that swallowed sound. This was my first solo hike since Dad died 2 years ago. I'd planned it meticulously. Maps, weather checks, a lightweight kit. The ridge was supposed to be my reward, a sunrise that would paint the valley gold. I needed this to feel him out here in the wind in the earth. But as I sat by the fire, the steak's char fading into the night, a chill settled in my bones. The pines loomed taller, their shadows stretching across the ground like fingers reaching for my tent. I told myself it was the altitude, the isolation playing tricks. I was alone. That's what I wanted, right? Around 10 p.m., I zipped myself into my sleeping bag, the nylon cool against my skin. The stars were relentless, a billion unblinking eyes staring down. I closed my eyes, picturing the sunrise, its warmth washing away the unease. But the forest had other plans. It was waiting, and I was too naive to see it. The wild doesn't care about your dreams. It has its own story to tell, and I was about to become part of it. The air grew colder, the tent's walls thin against the night. I thought of Dad's stories, tales of hikers lost in these woods, their gear found, but their bodies gone. I'd called them campfire myths, but now with the silence pressing in, they felt real. My knife lay beside me, its blade a faint glint in the moonlight. I touched it, grounding myself, but the unease grew. The forest wasn't empty. It was holding something back, something that knew I was here. I tried to sleep, focusing on my breath, but the quiet was suffocating. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves felt like a signal. I told myself it was nothing, a deer the wind. But deep down, I knew better. The woods were alive, and they were watching. I drifted off the promise of dawn pulling me under. But the forest wasn't done with me. It was only beginning. As I lay there, the silence became a presence, heavy and oppressive. I remembered a night years ago, camping with Dad, when he'd woken me to watch a meteor shower. We'd sat in the dark, the sky ablaze, and he'd said, "The woods are honest. They don't hide their dangers if you know how to look. I hadn't looked hard enough tonight. The fire's last embers died, and the cold crept closer, wrapping around me like a warning. I clutched my knife tighter, its edge a small defiance against the dark. Sleep came, but it was shallow, broken by the sense that something was out there, waiting for me to let my guard down. The sound hit me like a blade, slow, deliberate footsteps crunching through the underbrush. My eyes snapped open, heart slamming against my ribs, the tent a cage of shadows. Then came the voices, low and jagged, slicing through the night like a warning. "We should have buried it," a woman hissed, her words sharp with venom. "Shut up," a man snapped back, his voice cold, controlled. Something heavy dragged across the earth, a sound that clawed at my spine, heavy and wrong. My blood froze. Who were they? And what were they dragging through my sanctuary? I lay paralyzed, my breath shallow, barely daring to move. The fire had died hours ago, leaving only the moon's pale glow seeping through the tent's fabric. The air was thick with the scent of pine and fear, my own sweat, mixing with the earth's damp musk. The voices were closer now, maybe 20 feet away, near the cliff's edge. "We're almost there," the woman said, her tone low, but laced with urgency, like she was holding back a scream. "Careful," the man replied, his voice steady but sharp, like a blade held at the ready. Her spine's already shattered. One good toss, and she's gone. My mind spun. Her body, a person. My heart pounded so loud I was sure they'd hear it, a drum beat betraying my hiding place. I inched forward, the sleeping bag rustling faintly, and pressed my eye to the half-zipped gap in the tent. Two figures stood in the moonlight, their silhouettes stark against the cliff's edge. The woman was wiry, her hair glinting silver, her movements tense but precise. The man was taller, broader, his shoulders hunched like a predator pacing its kill. They were dragging something, a duffel bag maybe, or something heavier, something that sagged unnaturally. I couldn't breathe. My mind screamed to stay still, but my body betrayed me. My hand brushed the zipper, the faint scrape cutting through the silence like a gunshot. The woman's head snapped up, her eyes scanning the trees, glinting like a wolf's. "You sure we're alone?" she whispered, her voice sharp enough to slice through bone. The man tilted his head, listening, his posture almost lazy, like he was savoring the hunt. "Thought I heard something," he said, his tone calm but chilling, like he knew I was there. The air turned thick, heavy with malice. I remembered Dad's story about a hiker who vanished on this trail. They'd found his pack, his tent, but never him. Just whispers of shadows in the woods of people who didn't belong. I'd laughed it off, but now it was real. The voices stopped, and the dragging sound paused. I held my breath. Hands over my mouth, my pulse a deafening roar. The forest felt alive now, its silence a lie, hiding something dark and hungry. I slid back, pressing myself into the tent's corner, my knife clutched tight. The blade was cold grounding, but it couldn't stop the fear crawling up my spine. The dragging resumed slower, now deliberate, like they were taunting me. I peeked again, my heart in my throat. They were closer to the cliff, the bag sagging between them, its weight pulling at their arms. The woman glanced back, her eyes lingering on the trees, and I swore she saw me. My tent was hidden behind the oak, but it felt exposed, a fragile shield against whatever they were. My mind raced, piecing together fragments of Dad's stories. He'd mentioned poachers, once hunters, who used these woods to hide their kills, animal or otherwise. But this wasn't poaching. This was something worse, something human. The bag's shape haunted me, its outline too soft, too heavy. I wanted to scream to run, but I was trapped, a mouse in a maze. The moonlight shifted, casting their shadows longer, and for a moment I saw the bag twitch. Or did I? My eyes burned, straining in the dark, but the image lingered, a seed of dread taking root. I forced myself to breathe slow and silent, my knife trembling in my hand. The dragging stopped again, and the man's voice cut through the night, low and deliberate. Let's finish this. My stomach twisted. I had to move to get out, but my body felt like lead. The oak shielded my tent, but for how long? The forest was their ally, not mine. I was alone, and they were coming closer. Branches tore at my skin, the forest a blur of claws and shadows as I ran. Their flashlights sliced through the dark beams like knives hunting me. Wait. The woman's voice echoed sharp and desperate. It's not what you think. But I knew better. I'd heard their words, seen the bag's unnatural weight. They weren't here to talk. They were hunters. And I was prey. The cliff loomed in my mind, a gaping maw, waiting to swallow me, just like it had whatever they'd thrown into the river's depths. I'd bolted the moment the man's eyes locked with mine, his voice calm but lethal. I know you're watching us. My legs moved before my mind caught up. tearing through the underbrush, boots pounding dirt. The forest was no sanctuary now. It was a labyrinth, every tree, a barrier, every shadow, a threat. I cut left, diving into thicker pines, their needles stinging my face. Their flashlights flickered behind me, beams slashing through the dark, closer than I wanted. Their footsteps were heavy, relentless, a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. My breath came in ragged gasps, the cold air searing my lungs. A branch snapped to my right, too close, and I realized they were splitting up, circling me like wolves. I stumbled my foot, catching a root, and went down hard. Mud coated my hands, my knees, the sting of a cut on my thigh barely registering. I scrambled up, the memory of that wet thud, the bag hitting the river, driving me forward. I couldn't stop. Not when their voices still echoed in my head, calm and cruel, planning their next move. I veered toward a denser patch of trees, hoping to lose them in the tangle. My pack was back at the tent, but I'd grabbed my knife and keys before crawling out. The blade was in my hand now, its weight a small comfort against the terror. The woman's voice came again, closer. "We have money. Just talk." But her words were a trap, laced with desperation, that didn't match her earlier venom. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The forest was their domain, and I was a stranger here, running blind. My lungs burned each breath, a struggle against the cold. The pines closed in their branches, clawing at my jacket, my face. I remembered a story Dad told about a hunter who'd gotten lost in these woods, chased by something he couldn't name. He'd survived, but his eyes were never the same, haunted by what he'd seen. I'd thought it was just a story, but now I felt it, the forest turning against me, its roots reaching to trip me, its shadows hiding my pursuers. A flashlight beam grazed my shoulder, and I ducked, heart pounding. The man's voice cut through the dark, steady, and chilling. "He's close." I zigzagged my boots, slipping on wet leaves, my mind racing. The trail to my car was somewhere ahead, but the forest felt endless, a maze designed to trap me. I tripped again, pain shooting through my thigh, and I realized blood was seeping through my pants. Had they thrown something? A rock, a knife. I didn't stop to check. I dove behind a boulder, my chest heaving, the knife trembling in my hand. Their footsteps slowed, deliberate, like they knew I was cornered. "Come out." The woman called, her voice softer now, almost pleading. "We just want to explain." But her tone was wrong, too smooth, like a lure cast into dark waters. I pressed myself against the rock, its cold surface grounding me. The forest was silent again. but it wasn't empty. They were out there, waiting their flashlights, scanning the dark like predators' eyes. I thought of Dad, how he'd taught me to read the woods tracks, wind the way a bird's silence could warn you. There were no birds now, no wind, just the heavy stillness of a place that knew death. I gripped my knife tighter, its blade a faint promise of survival. I had to move to reach the trail, but every step felt like a gamble. The cliff's edge was too close, its drop a constant threat in my mind. I couldn't let them catch me, not after what I'd heard. The ditch was my lifeline, a shallow grave of dirt and leaves where I pressed myself flat, praying the earth would hide me. Their footsteps passed inches above the woman's voice, a low growl. How could you let him go? The man's reply was calm, too calm. He didn't see her face clearly. Let's move. My heart hammered, but I stayed still, the cold seeping into my bones. I was alive, but for how long? The forest knew their secrets, and now so did I, a witness to something I was never meant to see. I waited my breath shallow until their steps faded into the night. My thigh throbbed where something, a rock, a knife, had struck me, the pain sharp but distant. The sky was shifting black, giving way to a pale yellow dawn, the light filtering through the pines like a hesitant promise. I crawled out, mud caking my hands, my clothes. Every rustle made me flinch, every shadow a threat. My car was down the trail, a lifeline in the distance, but reaching it felt impossible. Their voices lingered in my mind, cold and calculated, planning their next move. I limped toward the ridge trail, my knife clutched tight, its blade a faint glint in the growing light. The forest was quieter now, but it wasn't safe. It would never be safe again. I moved slowly, every step a risk, every sound a warning. The memory of their silhouettes, the bag sagging between them, haunted me. What had they done? And why did I feel like they weren't finished? The cliff's edge was still too close, its drop a constant threat in my mind. I thought of Dad's lessons. The woods don't lie, but they don't always tell the truth either. I scanned the ground for tracks, but the mud was a mess, smeared with leaves and my own blood. My thigh burned the wound deeper than I'd realized, but I couldn't stop. The trail wound downhill toward the lot where I'd parked my car hours ago. It felt like a lifetime. The pines thinned the sky, lightening, but the fear didn't fade. Every snap of a twig was them, every shadow their shape. I reached a clearing, the trail visible now, a faint path cutting through the trees. My car was out there somewhere, but the forest felt like it was closing in its branches, reaching to hold me back. I moved faster, ignoring the pain, the knife still in my hand. The man's voice echoed in my head, calm and cruel. He's close. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still out there, watching, waiting for me to stumble again. A branch snapped behind me, and I spun, heart in my throat. Nothing. Just the wind, or so I told myself. But the forest was alive, its silence a lie. I kept moving, the trail sloping downward, the air growing warmer as dawn broke. My car appeared through the trees, a battered lifeline in the distance. I almost sobbed with relief, but the fear kept me sharp. I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking the wound on my thigh, screaming with every step. I reached the car, my breath ragged, and jammed the key into the lock. The door swung open, and I collapsed into the driver's seat, my hands trembling as I tried to start the engine. The forest was still out there, watching its secrets buried in the river below. I turned the key, the engine roaring to life, and I didn't look back. Not yet. I couldn't afford to. The ranger station was a blur of fluorescent lights and skeptical faces. My leg bled through my pants. My face scratched raw. But I told them everything. The voices, the bag, the chase. They searched the cliff, found my tent, slashed boot prints, drag marks. But no body, no blood. Just my word against the wild. No missing persons, they said. No arrests. But I know what I saw. And at night, when I close my eyes, I still see them, standing in the dust, watching me drive away, their smiles carved into my memory. The drive to the station was a nightmare. My hands shaking on the wheel, the man's face at my window, burned into my mind. His smile, his knife, the way he didn't chase, just watched. I'd barely made it. Limping, stumbling my thigh, bleeding my face, torn by branches. The rangers listened, their faces blank, but I could see it in their eyes. They didn't believe me. They searched the cliff, found my tent in shreds, the ground marked with boot prints, and long, bloody drag marks leading to the edge. But the river below was empty, its waters hiding whatever they'd thrown. I sat in the station, a paper cup of coffee trembling in my hands, the fluorescent lights buzzing like flies. The rangers asked questions, their voices flat, clinical. "You're sure you heard them say, 'her'?" One asked. I nodded, my throat tight. I could still hear the woman's voice, sharp and venomous. We should have buried it. I could still see the bag, its shape wrong, sagging, like it held something broken. But the rangers found nothing. No body, No blood, no trace of the couple. Just my story and a slashed tent that proved nothing. I haven't been back to the woods since. The sunrise I'd come for, I never saw it. The forest kept its secrets, and I'm left with mine, a weight I carry every day. I see them in my dreams, standing in the dust, their smiles cold and knowing. I see the bag, its shape shifting in my mind, sometimes moving, sometimes still. I see the cliff, its edge, a hungry mouth waiting for me to fall. I moved to the city after that trading trees for concrete silence for noise. But the forest follows me. Every creak of a floorboard, every shadow in the corner feels like them. I keep my knife close its blade, a reminder of that night, of how close I came to joining whatever they threw into the river. The rangers called it a prank. Maybe kids, maybe my imagination. But I know better. The woods don't lie, but they don't always tell the truth either. And I'm still running from what I saw. The air clings to my skin like a shroud, cold and heavy, as I step off the bus into a village that feels like it's been forgotten by time. My name is Amamira, and this is my first solo trip, a chance to escape the noise of the city and find myself in the quiet of the mountains. But as the bus wheezes away, leaving me alone on a cracked dirt road, I feel a prickle at the base of my neck. The village is too still. The houses hunched like old men, waiting for something to happen. A faint smell of decay lingers, not strong enough to name, but enough to make my stomach twist. I clutch my backpack tighter, my boots crunching against the gravel, and I wonder if I've made a mistake. Milena and Goran Karovic stand waiting for me, their silhouettes sharp against the gray sky. Their smiles are wide, too wide, like they've been carved into their faces with a knife. Beside them is their daughter Anna, a girl so pale she looks like she's been drained of life. Her eyes are dark pools, scanning me with an intensity that makes my skin crawl. Welcome, Amamira, Milena says, her voice thick, with an accent that wraps around my name like fog. We are Mr. and Mrs. Karovic, and this is our daughter, Anna. You will love it here. Her words are warm, but they feel rehearsed, like lines from a play she's performed too many times. The house they lead me to is old, its wooden beams sagging under the weight of years. The air inside is heavy with the scent of herbs, rosemary, thyme, and something sharper, like rotting meat left too long in a cupboard. There are no mirrors on the walls, no clocks ticking, just an oppressive silence that presses against my eardrums. My room is small, with a single bed and a nightstand that wobbles when I set my bag down. The window overlooks a barren yard where a lone tree twists toward the sky like a claw, reaching for something it can never grasp. I try to shake off the unease, telling myself it's just the strangeness of a new place. But why does it feel like the house is watching me? Dinner is a heavy affair, a spread of boiled potatoes and greasy meat that sits like a stone in my stomach. Goran's fingers tap incessantly on the table, a rhythm that grates against my nerves. Milena watches me eat, her eyes glinting in the dim light of a single candle. Anna sits across from me, silent, her fork moving mechanically to her mouth. I try to make conversation, asking about the village, but their answers are vague, their smiles never reaching their eyes. "You must be tired," Milena says, pressing a cup of tea into my hands. The liquid is bitter, coating my tongue with an aftertaste I can't place. I sip it to be polite, but my eyelids grow heavy, and I excuse myself to bed. As I lie in the dark, the house seems to breathe around me. The floorboards groan. The wind whispers through the cracks, and I can't shake the feeling that I'm not alone. My mind drifts to the stories I've heard about travelers who vanish in remote places, their names forgotten, their faces erased. What if I'm one of them? I push the thought away, but it lingers like a shadow in the corner of my vision. The tea pulls me under, and I fall into a restless sleep, unaware of the nightmare waiting to unfold. The darkness presses against my eyes, thick and suffocating, as if the night itself is trying to swallow me whole. I wake to the sound of my own heartbeat, loud and unsteady, in the quiet of the Korovic house. The air is colder now, sharp enough to sting my lungs with each breath. I sit up, my sheets damp with sweat, and check my phone. 2:17 a.m. The silence is unnatural, broken only by the faint creak of the house settling. Or is it something else? I strain my ears, and there it is, a low, guttural sound, like voices chanting in a language I don't understand. It rises and falls, weaving through the walls, pulling me toward it like a hook in my chest. I slip out of bed, my bare feet freezing against the wooden floor. The chanting grows clearer as I tiptoe to the door, my hand trembling as I press it against the keyhole. In the flickering candlelight of the hallway, I see them, Milena and Goran, circling Anna like predators. She stands, motionless, her head bowed, her pale hair falling over her face. Milena holds something small and dark, forcing it into Anna's mouth as the chanting grows louder. The words are sharp, jagged, like shards of glass cutting through the air. My breath catches, and I stifle a cough. But it's too late. Their heads snap toward my door, their eyes glinting like animals caught in a flashlight's beam. I freeze my lungs, burning, until the chanting resumes slower now, as if they're testing the silence for my presence. I back away, my heart pounding so hard, I'm sure they can hear it. What are they doing to her? My mind races with possibilities, rituals, sacrifices, things I've only read about in horror stories. I try to convince myself it's a dream, a trick of the tea, but the memory of Anna's empty eyes burns in my mind. I climb back into bed, pulling the covers over my head like a child hiding from a monster. But the chanting lingers, seeping into my thoughts, wrapping around my mind like a vine. I don't sleep again that night. Morning comes, and the house feels different, lighter, as if the night's events were a fever dream. Milena hums in the kitchen, frying bread in pork fat, her movements casual, almost cheerful. Goran reads a tattered newspaper, his fingers still tapping that infuriating rhythm. Anna sits at the table, eating slowly, her eyes fixed on her plate. I force a smile, my stomach churning as I sit down. "Did you sleep well?" Milena asks, her voice dripping with false warmth. I nod my throat too tight to speak. They know I heard them. They know I saw. They insist on taking me to the village, a tour that feels more like a performance than a welcome. The streets are empty, the windows shuttered, the air thick with the same decay I smelled last night. No children play, no dogs bark, just silence, heavy and wrong. I ask about the village's history, but Milena deflects with vague answers, her smile never wavering. Goran walks behind us, his footsteps too close, his presence like a weight on my shoulders. Anna trails along her gaze, distant as if she's not fully here. What is this place? I wonder, my unease growing with every step. By the time we return to the house, I'm convinced I've made a terrible mistake. The shadows in my room seem to pulse alive with secrets the house refuses to share. Back in my room, I lock the door, my hands shaking as I sit on the bed. The memory of last night's chanting clings to me, a cold weight in my chest. I need answers, something to explain the Korovik's strange behavior. Anna's vacant stare, the oppressive silence of the village. I start searching the room, my fingers tracing the edges of the nightstand, the bed frame, the walls. The wood is worn, scratched, as if someone or something has clawed at it in desperation. I find nothing at first, just dust and the faint smell of decay. But then I notice the nightstand drawer. It's stuck, resisting my tugs. But I pull harder, my nails digging into the wood until it pops free. Inside is a stack of photographs, their edges yellowed and curling. The first one shows a young man smiling, his eyes bright with the kind of hope I felt when I planned this trip. The next is a woman, her face lit with excitement, a backpack slung over her shoulder. But as I flip through the stack, the images change. The faces grow pale, their features smearing like wet paint on a canvas. Eyes sink into sockets, mouths twist into unnatural shapes. The last photo is different. Milena, her grin wide and predatory, her eyes black as pitch. Scrawled below in jagged handwriting are the words, "She carries us all." My hands tremble, the photos slipping to the floor. Who are these people? What happened to them? I shove the photos back into the drawer, my heart racing. The room feels smaller now, the walls closing in the air, thick with the scent of rot. I grab my phone, hoping to call for help, but there's no signal, just a blank screen, mocking my panic. I try to calm myself, to think logically, but the memory of Anna's empty eyes and Milena's carved smile keeps pulling me back. I need to leave. The thought is clear sharp, but my car is miles away, and I have no idea how to navigate the village's winding paths. I decide to confront Goran, to make an excuse, and leave before night falls again. At dinner, I force myself to eat my hands, steadying as I rehearse my words. I've had a great time. I lie, my voice trembling slightly, but some responsibilities came up. I need to leave early. Goran's grin widens his eyes, glinting with something dark. Sure, he says, his voice slippery, like oil sliding over glass. But you should rest. Wake up early for your journey. His words feel like a command, not a suggestion, and I nod, my throat tight. Milena watches me, her smile never faltering, and Anna stares at her plate, her fork unmoving. They know I'm lying. They know I know. Back in my room, I lie awake, the house's silence pressing against me like a physical force. The chanting starts again, louder this time, pulling me toward it like a tide. I fight the urge to investigate, to stay safe behind my locked door, but the sound is relentless, burrowing into my skull. What are they doing to her? I wonder, my mind conjuring images of blood and sacrifice. I clutch my phone, the blank screen, a reminder of my isolation. The night stretches on endless, and I know I can't stay here another day. My reflection stares back, but it's not me. Not entirely. I wake with a start, my sheets soaked with sweat, my breath ragged. The chanting stopped, hours ago, but its echo lingers in my mind, a low hum that refuses to fade. I check my phone. 1:03. The room is dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the screen. I flip the camera to selfie mode, needing to see something familiar, something real. But the face looking back isn't mine. My features are there, but they're wrong. A second mouth stretches beside my own, thin and lipless. Another eye blinking just above my cheekbone. I drop the phone, my heart hammering, and when I pick it up again, the image is gone. But I know what I saw. The house is silent now, but it's not a comforting silence. It's the kind that hides things, that waits for you to let your guard down. I slip out of bed, my hands shaking, as I pull on my boots. I need to leave now, before the Karaviks do whatever they're planning. I grab my backpack, checking for my keys, my wallet. Anything that can get me out of this place. But as I reach for the door, I hear it again, the chanting louder, closer, coming from outside. It's not just Milena and Goran now. There are other voices, a chorus of whispers that twist through the air like smoke. I creep to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to see. Beyond the barn, torches flicker in a stone circle, their flames casting long shadows across the yard. The villagers stand in a ring, their faces blank, their eyes fixed on Anna in the center. She's limp, her body swaying like a puppet with cut strings. Milena steps forward, her voice low and commanding. Her youth is strong, she says, pointing toward the house, toward me. She can carry too. Bring her. My blood runs cold, my legs trembling as I back away from the window. They're coming for me. I lock the door, my hands fumbling with the latch, but I know it won't hold them. The chanting grows louder, the voices merging into a single, relentless drone that fills my head. I shove the nightstand against the door, my arms straining, but it feels futile, like trying to stop a flood with a handful of sand. The photos from the drawer flash in my mind, those faces smeared and broken, their lives stolen. Is that what they want from me? My breath hitches, my vision blurring with panic. I need a plan, a way out, but the house feels like a trap, its walls closing in, its shadows alive with intent. I grab my phone again, hoping for a miracle, but the screen is still dead. The chanting is outside my door now. Footsteps heavy on the stairs. I press myself against the wall, my heart pounding so hard, I'm sure they can hear it. Stay calm. Find a way out. The words repeat in my mind, an anchor against the rising tide of fear. I scan the room for anything I can use, a weapon, a tool, anything to give me a chance. The window is my only option, but it's small, and the drop to the ground is steep. I have no choice. I have to try. The torches burn like eyes in the dark, watching, waiting, as I step into a nightmare I can't escape. I force the window open, the wood groaning under my hands, and climb onto the sill. The night air is cold, biting at my skin as I lower myself to the ground. My boots hit the dirt, and I crouch, my breath shallow, my eyes darting toward the stone circle. The chanting is deafening now, a wall of sound that presses against my chest. The villagers stand motionless, their faces lit by the flickering flames, their eyes empty. Anna is still in the center, her body trembling, her lips moving as if she's trying to speak, but can't. I creep toward the barn, staying low, my heart pounding in my ears. The smell of ash and something fouler blood maybe fills the air. I hide behind a stack of crates, my hands shaking as I peer at the circle. Milena raises a bowl, its contents dark and glistening, and smears it across Anna's forehead. Goran steps forward, his voice low and guttural, chanting words that make my skin crawl. One gives, one takes, one stays, he says, his breath hot in the night air. The villagers echo him, their voices rising like a tide, pulling me toward them. I feel it then, a pressure in my skull, like fingers pressing against my thoughts. My vision doubles. Anna's face swimming in front of me, her eyes wide and terrified. Let go. Be one. The words aren't mine, but they echo in my mind, soft and insistent, like a lullaby I can't resist. I shake my head, digging my nails into my palms to stay grounded. This isn't real. It's not real. But Anna's tears are real, glinting in the torchlight, and I know she's fighting too. She doesn't want this, whatever it is. I can't stay hidden. They'll find me soon, and I'd rather face them than be dragged into that circle. I step out, my legs trembling, and shout, "Stop!" The word is weak, swallowed by the chanting, but Milena's head snaps toward me. Her smile is gone, replaced by a look of cold calculation. "Bring her," she says, and the villagers move as one, their hands reaching for me. I run my boots slipping in the mud, my breath ragged. I don't know where I'm going, only that I need to escape. I reach the circle before I can stop myself, the heat of the torches searing my skin. Anna's eyes meet mine, and for a moment I see her not the empty shell, but a girl scared and trapped. I lunge, knocking over the bowl of fire in Melena's hands. The embers explode, sparks flying into the night, and the villagers scream their voices sharp with panic. I grab Anna's arm, pulling her from the circle, her body limp but moving with me. We run the forest, closing around us, the villagers' howls chasing us like wolves. The trees claw at my skin, their branches like fingers trying to pull me back into the dark. Anna stumbles beside me, her breath hitching her hand cold in mine. The forest is a maze of shadows, the torchlight fading behind us, but never gone. The villagers' voices echo through the trees, their words twisted and sharp, calling my name. Amamira. Melena shrieks her voice, cutting through the night like a blade. You must carry us. We are nothing without you. The words sink into me, heavy and wrong, like a weight I can't shake off. I pull Anna harder, my legs burning, my lungs screaming for air. The ground is uneven, roots tripping us with every step, but I don't stop. I can't stop. The pressure in my skull grows stronger. Anna's presence in my mind, like a second heartbeat, whispering, "Let go." I grit my teeth, focusing on the pain in my hands, the sting of branches against my face. Stay here. Stay you. Anna's tears wet my hand, and I know she's fighting too. Her small frame trembling, but moving forward. Headlights cut through the trees, sudden and blinding. A postal van, its engine rumbling like a lifeline. I stumble into the road, waving my arms, my voice raw as I scream, "Help me, please!" The driver slams on the brakes, his eyes wide as I collapse against the door. Anna beside me. He doesn't ask questions, just pulls us into the van and speeds away the villagers' howls, fading into the distance. I look back, expecting to see them chasing us, but there's nothing. Just the dark, swallowing the road behind us. In the van, Anna clings to me, her body shaking, her eyes still empty, but alive. The driver glances at us in the rearview mirror, his face pale. "What the hell was that?" he asks, but I can't answer. My mind is a fog, the chanting still echoing in my skull. Anna's presence, lingering like a ghost. I check my phone, the screen flickering to life, and see one photo, a blurry selfie. My face half melted into Anna's, our features twisted together like a nightmare. I delete it, my hands shaking, but the image burns in my mind. We reach a hospital, the lights harsh and sterile after the darkness of the village. The driver stays until the police arrive, his hands trembling as he recounts what he saw. I try to tell them everything, the chanting, the photos, the ritual, but their faces are skeptical. their questions sharp. There's no one by that name in the village, they say. The Karoviks moved away years ago. I want to scream to show them the photo, but it's gone, erased, like the faces in the drawer. The mirror lies, but I know the truth. It's still watching me. I wake in the hospital. 2 days later, my body aching, my mind heavy with fragments of the night. The police take my statement, but their eyes say they don't believe me. They search the village, they say, but find nothing. No stone circle, no torches, no Karoviks. Just an empty house, its walls bare, its air clean of decay. I want to argue, to make them see, but my words feel hollow, like I'm trying to convince myself as much as them. Anna is gone, taken by her family, the nurses say. I never see her again, but her face lingers in my mind. Her tears real, even if nothing else was. I check my phone one last time, hoping for proof, and find a single photo I didn't delete. It's me, but not me. My face half melted into Anna's, her eyes staring through mine, her mouth curled in a smile that isn't hers. I delete it, my hands shaking, but I know it's too late. Something stayed with me that night, something I can't name. Back home, the world feels different, sharper, like I'm seeing it through someone else's eyes. I avoid mirrors, but sometimes I catch my reflection in a window, a screen, a spoon. It's always wrong. A second mouth, an extra eye, a shadow that moves when I don't. I tell myself it's trauma, my mind playing tricks. But deep down, I know better. They wanted me to carry them, and maybe I am. The thought is a weight heavy and cold that I can't shake off. I try to move on to forget the village, the Karoviks, Anna. But at night, when the world is quiet, I hear it, a low chant, soft and distant, calling my name. I lock my doors, close my curtains, but it's not enough. The house feels alive, its shadows watching, waiting. I don't know what they want, or if they're still out there, but I know one thing: I'll never be alone again.